We normally would start with mental health on Wednesdays, but Mizzou pulled off some miracle last night. Mizzou squared off against Cal in college basketball. The Tigers were close until 5 minutes left in the first half when Cal went on an 18-2 run. That 2 points became at halftime with an explode away for a layup, but the Tigers were still down by a lot, that being 16. But then they pulled off an 8-0 run. That made it Cal down by 8. With 13 minutes to go, Mizzou would pull 59-57. It would keep going back and forth, mostly Cal having the lead and keeping it all the way until 4:56 to go. And Mizzou grabbed a 2-point lead from former Tar Heel Mark Mitchell, who took the lead back for the Tigers. Mizzou would lead the rest of the game 98-93 was the final. Mizzou's got KU next. Mizzou has a brand new, very good guard, Anthony Robinson, he's the best player on the team. He led the Tigers with 29 points, and Adrian Stojkovic got 26 in the loss. Mizzou has KU next. Speaking of KU, they played tonight against Creighton. Creighton was 15 in the polls to start the season, but against major conference teams, which is SEC, ACC, Big 10, or Big 12, out of conference play, and the ACC as well, Creighton is 1-3 against those teams, which has dropped them out of the rankings. The Jayhawks, who are undefeated and looking really good, maybe not the best, but looking really good, and they are number 1. So many people keep them number 1. Players to watch out for: Hunter Dickerson and Zeke Mayo and KJ Adams. Creighton player to watch out for: Ryan Kloblerner. Game time is at 7:30 on FS1. That completes college basketball. KJ Adams, the senior, and Zeke Mayo all play a big role on KU's team. Watch out for player Ryan Kloblerner. Game on 7:30 on FS1. Now let's get to the series of inspiration people live with one hand. Imagine waking up every morning forgetting you are slightly different from people to people. We're going to talk about One Hand series. We continue that series. Jason Duffy will also join us on this show. And we talk about Jim Abbott, a one-handed pitcher. First, we start with this. Imagine if you're walking in morning and forgetting a slightly different people around you. Trust me, looks very hard with one hand. The truth is, I've lived with this character in this story. Truth is, I've lived with one hand, and it has shaped in ways I never have expected. When I was 12, the kid, 12 hours each day thinking about my arm or leg, or having thoughts that I was missing a part of my body. It was until then I started asking myself questions, curious like eyes, that I realized that assumed normal wasn't the same. Everyone else is normal. Still, what they got time, I got to learn, and valuable lessons. I am not completely disabled because it would have written this. I have a right hand that is fully complete, just like the majority of people reading. And I have reading this article, and I have another one which goes my shoulder to the elbow, just bit beyond. People always ask, where is your hand? And I smile, and before giving them a funny story I can cook up immediately. Do believe it, especially kids, before I shake off with your laughter and tell them the real truth. He has a disabled arm that is a certain kind of disability. We'll talk more about that next week. It's cool because it's my little mom who told me I hated and would throw tantrums because I didn't want to wear them. I guess it bothered me that somehow I got to live fine without. Now I sometimes forget that I have one hand. I don't wake up each day feeling bad and thinking, oh, I have one hand and I gotta deal with life. Though I get reminded about it whenever someone asks. That doesn't happen much anymore. I sometimes see the prosthetic, and right now I might be wrong when I decide to get one. I would want signature of everyone who has supported me and made me feel like I have two full hands. So sort of like people get signed their cast in school. Maybe he just wants the people that are nice to him or kind to him to have the one hand and listen to him. And that's who he wants to have sign it. Not everybody that's a jerk, he doesn't want to have sign it. It's a manifestation. Secondhand seeing the signature would be an honor to people who helped me feel like I'm different. I'm not different than that's just me. Before, Leg has taught me resilience and creativity and appreciation for the little things unique in life. I may not have physically abilities just as others do, but that doesn't make me an incomplete person. And in reality, that process is just adjusting and thriving me and made me feel whole. My hope is that my story resonates with anyone who has felt different, so they can embrace the differences and let it shape and live a good life. I am not defined by what I have or what's missing in my body. Now I'm defined how I have filled those void spaces with strength and love. And I'm going to try to practice it. I'm not defined by my schizoaffective. This is Sam Vaughn for Sam Sports Report and also Sam's physical disability page on Facebook that I have started, as I probably should, but I use it. Look for it on that.
Jim Abbott's story transcends baseball, and sports in general for that matter. It's a story of a human being overcoming major adversity. Despite being born with only one hand, Jim wanted to play baseball just like every other kid growing up in the 70s, and he did so to the highest level of amateur baseball and eventually the major leagues. Because of that, it's also one of those stories that even non-baseball fans tend to be fairly familiar with, especially his 1993 no-hitter with the Yankees, and rightly so, but as with any good baseball story, you can dive as deep as you want to, like how Jim Abbott wasn't even the first major league player with this type of handicap. Pete Gray, a natural right-hander who had lost the majority of his right arm in a wagon accident at the age of 8, suited up as a wartime addition to the St. Louis Browns in 1945, after being named the Southern Association Player of the Year for the Memphis Chickasaws in 1944. This move saw Gray bypass 2 levels of professional baseball. He was one of several interesting players who joined big league rosters in the stead of a bunch of minor leaguers and even some marquee major leaguers, most notably Ted Williams, who were serving in World War II. Gray's presence resulted in an uptick in ticket sales for the Browns, and Pete gladly did charity work in support of troops coming home as amputees. Pete Gray played in the outfield, and as we'd see in Jim Abbott 50 years later, Pete was also a master of transferring his glove across his body. Understandably though, Pete struggled at the plate, ultimately batting .218 in 243 at-bats. Most single-A hitters would probably hang out around the Mendoza line at best if promoted straight to the show today, in my opinion at least. His struggles at the plate were a source of frustration for his teammates, though, who were trying to repeat as AL pennant winners. This would ultimately be the last winning season for the Browns before they packed their bags and moved to Baltimore 9 years later. Pete Gray hung around the minors for a couple more years and made barnstorming appearances into the 1950s before a quiet retirement in the Pennsylvania mountains. A 1986 television movie was made about his life called A Winner Never Quits, starring Keith Carradine. It's a pretty cool watch.